Your screenplay, Queen Hereafter, was longlisted by the Thousand Films Screenwriting Competition in 2019, and it's from that you adapted and wrote your debut novel, Lady MacBethad. And so that is what we're here to talk about tonight. So everybody, please put your hands together and welcome Isabelle Schuler. Anyone who hasn't yet read Lady MacBethad, can you sum it up in a few short lines?
Oh boy. Like you said, it's sort of a retelling of Shakespeare's Lady Macbeth. It's kind of a prequel to the play, so the book doesn't actually cover the events of the play. It sort of imagines her life leading up to it. My sort of buzz, publicity thing that I like to say is that it's more than a retelling, it's a reclamation. Mm-hmm. It's a refusal to relegate a powerful queen to a footnote in someone else's history. So a lot of alliteration there. But yeah, that is probably how I would describe it.
So I would have loved to have had in the book. It's a guide to pronunciation.
Yes.
And I've been Googling it.
Yeah.
How do you say Boedhe?
Yeah.
So I'm sort of interested in your research into the Scottish history and sort of how that all happened.
Yeah.
How much you now know about.
I knew a lot. I've realised now it's been about a year and a half since I've sort of really lived in the world. And I got a question recently about Picty traditions, and I was just I was like, I need to bring my research with me. It's just kind of have the folder with me. But no, in terms of the research that I did, I sort of did it in two bouts. I did the first, which was just for the screenplay. And for that, I sort of had the luxury of not having to worry about the material world, because I thought, a costume designer will figure out what they wore and production designer can figure out the sort of props and things. So I just focused on lineage and all of the different genealogies and who, which king was in power and how it transitioned, which at that time, sort of early modern history, in Scotland especially, the rate of turnover with Scottish kings is shocking. It reads like something out of Game of Thrones, where it feels like everybody's killing everybody else, and so that was sort of how I approached the research for it initially. And then of course when I went to write the book, I remember sitting down and I was like, this will be fine. I've got the whole TV show planned out. I'll just translate it to a novel. And I think I wrote something like, she walked across and I was like, I have no idea what, is it mud? Is it stone? Is it what? So then I had to do a whole another bout of research where I went to, all sorts of things. Archaeology, there's quite a lot of archaeology that's happened. There are some great textbooks. The Kingdom of the Picts is one, Kingdom of Alba actually, and sort of then started to piece together the world. But one of my biggest fears actually with the book was that I didn't put enough sheep in it. Because I don't think there's a single mention of sheep in the whole book, and that's just one of those little writer things. Oh yeah, that's right.
There you go. You have got sheep in sheepskin.
And it would have been more goats or cows or something. But yeah, so I did quite a lot of research in terms of that.
So do you know how to pronounce all of it?
I do. Yes, I'm not very good at it because obviously I've not got the accent. But so that one I believe is her father's name is Bode, which is Boedhe. And then I think the hardest one is a character named Gilcomgain, and that is I don't actually know what's spelled out, but you see it on the page, and it is kind of, and actually the only reason why I know how to pronounce that is because quite fortuitously there was a animated show in the 90s, I think, called Gargoyles, which is that sort of really classic animation, really old school. And I'm not quite sure what the premise is, but there's one episode that actually covers that bit of Scottish history, and Gilcomgain is in it. So that's how I sort of confidently know how to pronounce his name. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But we get to know the character of Gruach extremely well. Her grandmother tells her to, look the innocent flower, but be the serpent beneath. And I think that's very accurately describes her. And she obviously did need to be a strong warrior to achieve her destiny. Did you feel, or were you ever tempted to kind of, what's the word, play a bit fast and loose with the kind of more history stuff to create a character that was a little bit more, was a bit softer, and that we might warm to more as a leading character?
So there's two parts of that question. I think, first of all, it's worth knowing the only reason why we know anything about this woman is because of the men in her life. So we have no idea what she was like as a person. She probably realistically had very little agency. She lives as this powerful queen in our minds, but that's simply because of Shakespeare's play. That's not actually grounded in anything really historical, as far as we would consider history today. So there's that. But in terms of making her, I guess, likable, it's a really good question. And I remember I was really concerned that, because how do you strike that balance? She's, when you Google sort of worst women characters in English literature, like she's top of, she's really up there. And so how do you sort of do justice to that? And also recognizing that this is a prequel. So she kind of is, my hope was really that you get to see glimpses of who she becomes. You don't actually see full Lady M, I have given, the kind of really vicious, but you get glimpses of that. So I was really worried about sort of making her likable and finding that line. And the other thing that I didn't want to do is I sometimes see in storytelling, and this is absolutely fine, but as a justification for especially women to do really heinous things, they have to suffer quite a lot of trauma first, because it's only through trauma that we are then allowed to be sort of, no limits and whatever. And I kind of just wanted her to have that anyway. I wanted it, and she does suffer a lot because it is early medieval Scotland, and you do have these ever-shifting power dynamics.
Very, very entertained in your historical note that you talk about Shakespeare's Easter eggs that you've put through the novel. The witches from the play. Do they feature in your novel at all? In any way, shape, or form?
That's such a good question.
Yes.
I think there's one quite obvious contender, but yeah.
Yes.
Possibly.
Ooh, who knows?
Let's see.
The Duncan in your novel, is that the same Duncan who, in the Scottish play, let's refer to it thus, that Lady Macbeth motivates her husband to kill?
The same. Sorry, what do you mean?
Duncan, as in the character.
Yeah, it is. In history, and this is something that I just love. But in terms of what Shakespeare has done, and just a classic example of how Shakespeare has twisted history to fit his purposes. But in history, Duncan was not a very good king, first of all. He only reigned for about 6 years. He was known for kind of being quite crap as a king, generally. Wasn't very good at leading battles. I don't think he won a single battle while he was on the throne. Whereas, in contrast, Macbethad reigned for 17 years, which was one of the longest reigning at the time. I think then Lulic succeeded him for 6 months, and then we have Malcolm Canmore as Malcolm III, who then, that's kind of when things start to settle down in Scotland, and rule just continues. And his reign was, not only was it 17 years, he was known as an excellent king, and it was so peaceful that he was actually able to go to Rome for a year for a pilgrimage, because he was a Christian, as they were by that point. So he just left Scotland for a year, and that's how good his reign was. And it's just fascinating that Shakespeare obviously has completely twisted that to make him the bad, sort of unhinged. And Duncan is this very fatherly character, kind of this very good character as well. And so that was quite interesting. But they're definitely the same character. the same Duncan.
You mentioned there about succeeding Macbethad, and in your historical note you say about the kind of fascination you have in what that kind of relationship would have been like, and I definitely think that is something that possibly merits greater exploration. Would you consider writing a kind of sequel, maybe, to Macbeth and continuing the story?
Another excellent question. Yeah, and one that I cannot currently answer at this present time.
We could possibly be getting near the edge of it now.
What I will say is that I have always envisioned this as a trilogy from the very beginning, like 3 seasons, obviously initially as a TV show, but it was always Lady Macbeth before the play, Lady Macbeth during the play, and Lady Macbeth after the play, which, for those of you who aren't as familiar with the play, in the play, she ends up killing herself. She commits suicide. It's not off screen, off stage, which as an actress is very unsatisfying. And also she sort of transitions quite quickly once she's fulfilled her role in the story of Macbeth. She disappears very, very, very quickly. And even from one scene to the next, we see her where Macbeth has actually begun to be a bit unhinged. There's this scene where he's had his best friend killed. He imagines the ghost of his best friend in the dining hall, and Lady M is actually the one who pulls him aside and is like, "Get yourself together. People think you're crazy, and you need to pull yourself together." And the next scene is when she's rubbing her hands and has gone crazy. So it's just like a lot happened between that and then that's the last scene we have of her, and then we hear through someone else, also, she threw herself off the battlements. And that, just for me, I was like, come on, Will, like, that's so not what she would have done. Like, that's not what she would have done. And so I've always thought it would be, whether or not that comes to fruition, this idea that she reemerges in history and sort of continues to play some kind of influence on politics is
fascinating. Any other? Yes, gentleman in the jacket.
Did Lady Macbeth kill herself? Do we know?
We have no idea. Once she marries Macbeth, we know nothing else. She disappears. Yeah. And by what we do have are the I always think I'm pronouncing it wrong, but the annals, that's the right word. Yes, I'm always very scared of pronouncing it a very different way. Something called the Annals of Ulster, which is just this chronicle, and all we know is she was the daughter of this person. She married this person. That person dies. Then she marries Macbeth, and then we just sort of lose her. So yeah, very, very little. Which makes sense, I think.
It does. Yeah, in the context of the time.
And actually, I must admit, as a writer, it's quite fun, because what it means is I have a lot of freedom to play. I sort of very, very briefly explored writing a novel set in Victorian England, and immediately was like, no, because I know someone is going to be like, that's not what pewter was made of. Like that there's so much knowledge that to kind of write in that time period, you have to be a historian, which I'm not. I'm a journalist, so I know how to research, but I'm not a historian. Whereas with that early medieval time, there's quite a lot that you can sort of play around with. Or at least that's how I view it. Thank you.